3 students shot and killed in that mass shooting at Michigan State.
All 3 deceased were MSU students.
A teenager killed 18 children.
The carnage in our nation's schools has become painfully repetitive.
On 13 February this year, at the Michigan State University, a gunman entered a classroom and shot dead 2 students in front of their teacher and went on a rampage throughout the campus to critically injure 6 more people. The teacher described it as 12 minutes of terror. In 2022, the number of people shot at in schools of USA was well around 332. According to K-12 school shooting database, 35 people were shot. In fact, gun violence in USA is now an epidemic, claiming lives every year, month, week and hours.
Gun deaths in the US have reached the highest rates in 50 years.
But why does gun violence exist in the US? Who and what must be held accountable? Is there a solution to this terror or not? Would be explored today in this episode of AKTK Geo. The biggest cause of the gun violence in the USA is the gun itself, the priority of possessing one in an evolved civil society of a highly developed nation. Let me ask a simple question. What do you think? How many guns does US have?
Guns have been around for centuries, but no nation has embraced the firearm as much as the United States.
With an estimated population of over 330 million in 2022, the number of guns in the US households were already in excess of 393 million by 2017. And this is according to the Small Arms Survey, which was conducted in June 2018.
For every 100 Americans now, the United States has 120 guns. In a comparison with 206 other countries, the United States ranked at number 1, while Afghanistan ranks at 63 as per calculated rankings.
Well, there are 2 broadly accepted reasons in the US which are making the gun possession a must. The first being self-defense against crimes which are rising out of mental illness, social, economic depression, video game addictions, and the second being good people having access to the advanced weapons against criminals.
We need guns because, to be quite frank, it's scary living in my neighborhood.
But having such reasons to make gun possession seemingly a right idea has backfired, hasn't it?
Could a good guy with a gun really stop a terrorist attack?
I think a good guy with a gun could protect himself or herself. I think if you have a choice of using your gun to save your life or having your life taken, then yes, I think you should have that choice.
There is no nationwide database in the US where the people register their gun possession. And in absence of strong federal gun trafficking laws, there is no accounting where all the guns being sold are ending up. Are they with the good guy seeking self-defense or with the bad guy seeking self-gratification? The self-defense and the good guy's weapon of choice have become a tool leading to hate crimes with most discriminatory angles, be it the Asian Americans or the LGBTQ club. Our focus till now had been on the underage victims of the gun violence, massacred without a reason. But now we are checking on incidents where ideological or radical differences have precipitated in hate.
And one of the people in that room happened to have it and goes boom, boom. You know what? That would have been a beautiful, beautiful sight, folks. That would have been a beautiful, beautiful sight.
The incident of Atlanta shooting at Asian business. 6 of the 8 victims were Asian women. Gun violence against Asian immigrants and Asian Americans had been on the rise ever since the COVID-19 pandemic hit.
According to the Forbes report, more Asian Americans are buying guns for protection against hate crimes.
In this report, gun shop owners stated that more Asians are being introduced to the firearms.
In another incident where a gunman targeted an LGBTQ nightclub in Colorado, he killed 5 people and injured 25 others.
Today, President Biden said in a statement, quote, places that are supposed to be safe spaces of acceptance and celebration should never be turned into places of terror and violence.
But the good guys cannot always save the day, while adding to the ever-increasing number of guns in the US. So what is the next resort? The people who swore to protect and to serve? Do they respond in time, or civilian guns are in need? Let's have a look. in an advanced nation where the police response should be immediate and well networked to apprehend a well-armed suspect as soon as possible. The quality of service is on a decline, leading to lower confidence in law enforcement and more focus on keeping a gun in handy. In the incident of Monterey Park shooting involved a single gunman but 2 shootout sites. By the time the police arrived at the first shootout site, the gunman had already escaped after killing 10 people and was already at the second site 17 minutes later. Is it a good response time?
A radio report on Morning Edition reveals that the police response time is taking longer in many cities, and one reason for that is the staff shortage.
Departments are struggling to fill vacancies left by officers who have quit or they have retired.
According to Jeff Ashner, who is a crime analyst, a lot of the larger agencies in the many states of the United States basically are seeing reasonably sizable increase in the average response time.
Now when the police are suffering slow response time and staff shortage, such concerns are enough to convince many that keeping a gun in handy is a good idea.
In the years since George Floyd's death and other high-profile incidents, protests demanding police reform, and the COVID pandemic, studies show police staffing down by 3% nationwide, resignations up by 42% in 2021 compared to 2019. More than a dozen departments we reached out to said they were understaffed, with many facing retention and recruitment challenges.
The National Firearms Act of USA, also called the NFA, is a federal act. It's merely a revenue measure which taxes the purchase and sale and creation of regulated items like firearms and its components. But the licensing and permitting authority remains with the state of the union. Since the laws that regulate the sale and possession of a firearm are not uniform throughout the United States, it has enough loopholes to exploit a firearm for criminal usage.
The NFA allows for the sale of regulated items in the category of machine guns, suppressed handguns, short barrel rifles, short barrel shotguns, destructive devices, and any other weapons.
Only 15 out of 50 states follow stringent gun ownership rules. However, even among these 15 states, there are varying levels of stringency. And the assault rifle, which is more of a weapon of mass assault instead of personal defense, is not prohibited from usage in most. In most of the states, purchase and ownership of multiple firearms are allowed once a citizen reaches the age of 18 years.
Well, the substantial background checks only happens in 1 or 2 states, followed by some form of gun safety trainings, which only happens in some more states. But all in all, these are only observed in 4 to 5 states, while through the rest of the nation, an adult do not even need a license or permit except their age certificates.
Can I get a couple of scratch-offs?
How old are you? You got your ID?
13.
You what?
I'm 13.
You can't get no scratch-off, baby.
Okay. All right.
It's laughable to everyone here, the idea that we'd ever expose a 13-year-old to the dangers of a lottery ticket. But then we arrive here at the gun show.
It should shoot pretty good for you.
I'll take it.
Within minutes, the 13-year-old easily and legally bought a .22 caliber rifle from a private seller and walked away with it.
The District of Columbia is by far the most regulated region when it comes to guns by US standards. However, the law of all the states cannot be regulated even by such an example. But why is it like that? The Bill of Rights of the US Constitution protects the fundamental rights of its citizens. The Second Amendment to the US Constitution states that a well-regulated militia, being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Does that even make sense in the time we are living now?
Gun ownership has been intertwined with the identity of America since the settlement of the 13 colonies. The Second Amendment to the U.S. Constitution guarantees Americans' right to keep and bear arms. But this simple phrase has led to decades of debate around gun control legislation.
This amendment made all kind of sense in the days when it was conceived, but now when the annual military expenditure of United States of America is highest on the earth, with a standing army which has the most number of firearms, I think it does not make any sense now.
Despite investing its taxpayers' money in hundreds of billions for defense, do the US still perceive any external threat for which it needs to mobilize armed civilians as militia? Who must decide what's good for the US and its society? The people. But when there is a conflict of opinions, there must be a fair trial and jury. Which brings us to the next question. The decision of the Supreme Court. What was it?
The only thing that's going to stop a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun.
There had not been one, but three major cases in the US judicial history where the state law had it out against the Second Amendment. Two were decided by the Supreme Court, while the third one was based on the verdict on the decisions previously made by the Supreme Court. These three cases would be known as US vs. Miller 1939, DC vs. Heller 2008, and McDonald vs. Chicago 2010. What happened in these cases?
Striking down some of the nation's strictest gun laws, the court emphasized the Second Amendment is not a second-class right. Writing for the 6-3 majority, Justice Clarence Thomas said concealed carry laws in New York and at least 5 other states prevent law-abiding citizens with ordinary self-defense needs from exercising their right to keep and bear arms.
In the US vs. Miller case of 1939, Jack Miller was charged with the violation of the National Firearms Act, which mandated a stamp as a permit to carry the transport of a short-barreled shotgun.
In the District of Columbia vs. Heller case of 2010, Officer Heller wanted to keep a handgun for self-defense at home, which was not permitted by the District of Columbia unless the gun is provided with a trigger lock and is kept disassembled. Heller challenged the DC authorities' restrictions at Supreme Court. The Supreme Court ruled that the Second Amendment guarantees an individual's right to possess a firearm unconnected with service in militia.
The third case took place in the McDonald's vs. Chicago trials of 2010, where the residents of Chicago demanded the possession of handguns under the rights secured by the Second Amendment.
The city of Chicago argued that the DC is not a state and that in Chicago, the legal provisions for the state of Illinois apply and its citizens have to abide by such law.
Hence, with the Second Amendment being a fundamental right, winning twice in the US court, the gun problems is without a definitive solution and would remain a two-party issue in the US, irrespective of the political affinity. However, a sharp decline in the abilities of the law enforcement and the gun regulations owing to the opposing political ideologies will keep being detrimental to the social fabric of the United States. If you like the video, share it with everyone, subscribe the channel and like the video. If you like, you can support us through Patreon, links are in description and pin comment. We'll be back soon with a new issue.